real quick. It's devlog time. Ooh. So, most of this devlog is just going to be me showing off content from the previous public update that I did not acknowledge in the previous video for the reason of surprise. I think everyone who listened to that has already played it, so... I will, however, be showing off the 6th and final playable character in this video. He will not be available to the public for a very long time, but I will be showing him off once I unlock him, which means replaying through Stage 5 for, the rest of Stage 5 for the video. Real quick, I'm going to show off the fact that Usurper now has an aerial move. Ooh. The spin move now has an aerial variant. It has a different hitbox, but effectively is the same move. Hits on the same frames, does the same amount of damage and knockback. Yeah. The reason I gave this to him is that out of all of the characters, barring the new character, Usurper had the absolute worst air capabilities out of anyone. He just had the basic, which made certain situations very, very annoying. And you will see some of those certain situations in this video. Endless was a big one, though. He wasn't the worst character for Endless, but he wasn't particularly great either. Bizok is the best character for Endless, by the way, as he is the only character whose basics do splash damage, and he is the only character whose basics hit both left and right of him instead of just the direction he's facing. So, yeah. Bizok is probably the worst character in the main story mode stages, at least in my opinion, but I do think he's the best one for Endless. Now, if you've played the thing yourself, you already know what's about to happen, or if you watched CK's video that he did like a few days ago where he played through up until Stage 5, you know what's about to happen, but here we are. So the statues come alive in the second room they're in. I did this on purpose. I cut right before this room on the previous recording so that you wouldn't see this. But I showed off the first statue room where they don't come alive to just let people know they existed. The statues are called Grom. They're only going to show up in the main story stages here, but they do spawn in Endless after a certain point, so there's that. I'm okay with Stage 5. It's not my least favorite stage in the game, but it's fine for what it is. Here is the boss of Stage 5, and technically the final boss of Easy Mode. He will not be the final boss of Normal or Hard, as the other half of the game is accessible in both of those modes. Normal and Hard will have the same final boss, by the way. I don't believe in lagging behind the true finale of a game behind the hardest difficulty. But whatever. So Kravaskus is another big reason as to why Usurper got the aerial spin. He only has a basic attack and a projectile spawn thing, but what's unique about him is that as you hit him, he starts flying in the room faster, and since he flies in a random direction instead of towards the player, hitting him as Usurper was essentially just tick damage, as, the only move that could effectively hit him in the air, unless you waited for him to get lower, was his basic. You didn't have an aerial skill that could do damage to him. Every other character had that, except the new character, I guess, but His knockback resistance is 6, and I think he has 150 health, somewhere in that range. He has less health than the other bosses, but there's a couple reasons why. Number one, the flying thing makes it significantly harder to hit him. And number two, he actually has a second phase. Now, the phase transition animation is a little awkward. The reason for that is because it's a placeholder. There's going to be a cutscene in between the phases. I don't know if cutscenes are going to be animated or stills. We'll see, but... So Kravaskus has got 3 moves. A move where he sends 2 saw blades across the screen, the move where he makes spikes spawn periodically across the bottom of the screen, and the move where he just summons the bouncing projectiles, same as Phase 1, except there's 3 of them. He actually has no basic move. He is the only boss, so I guess Beatpunk didn't have one either, but Beatpunk's hands did. So this is technically the only boss that doesn't have a basic move, kind of. And that opens up Stage 6, technically. Now, Stage 6 does not have a description, but it does have an icon, and it does have the boss's silhouette. I have drawn the boss. He has no animations yet, but I have drawn the boss. If you recognize the silhouette of the boss, you'd know that he is the only boss returning from a previous game, at least so far. I thought that's something this game was missing, was returning bosses and returning enemies in general. This game didn't really have any of that. And in terms of a playable roster, it has the least amount of returning characters of any sequel-based game I've made, other than Knights, I guess, but that wasn't really a sequel, was it? This has the highest concentration of original characters out of any of them, including Rise 1, but ooh. If you recognize that silhouette, you would know who that is. Spoiler alert, I guess. It's not Lithidus. It is a different returning character with that head shape. If you know who that is, you know. But anyway, now we can show off the new character, the Boglet. Boglet, on a conceptual level, is the character who has went through the most changes from the original idea, which I mentioned all the way back before I even made Stage 4. Boglet was supposed to be this weird, like, clockwork, steampunk-esque thing, and he still kind of is that. We'll get to it, but yeah, Boglets went through a lot of changes from concept to the game itself. Now, looking at his stats, you'd notice, oh hey, question mark in speed, health, damage, and jump, and even type. Boglet is the weirdest character in the game, and if this game gets DLC characters, he's still going to be weirder than all of them. I do not intend to make a character this gimmicky or with this much depth, I guess, in this game ever again. Boglet is the peak of that. So do not make suggestions that center around the concepts Boglet brings to the table. This is the exception, not the rule going forward. So anyway, jumping in, you will notice that Boglet is the fastest character in the game. His jump height is the highest in the game. His health is 50, which is the lowest of any character in the game. And damage-wise, and knockback-wise, he's pretty limp. In fact, he's the only character who does not have a unique animation for their air basic. He does not have any sort of aerial. His primary skill can only be used on the ground, and it does no knockback effectively. It technically does have a knockback, like 2, but no enemy in the game has knockback resistance lower than 2, lower than 3, other than enemies that can be killed in one hit, like Grom, and this thing does pitiful damage. So that's, let's go ahead and show off Boglet's secondary skill. So Boglet will retract into his backpack, and all of the mechanical stuff will come out of it. This here is the Grotkin. Now, Grotkin is an interesting case. He is one of the slowest characters in the game. He has the lowest jump height out of any character. That being, he can't even navigate the hub area. He, again, has no aerial, but in terms of damage and knockback, he is a beast. So he's got a basic. This hammer is really good for a basic. The aerial variant, where he uses the saw thingy, pretty much the same. And his primary skill, the thing where he swings the hammer and revs the saw at the same time, is kind of busted. It does about 40 damage if the enemy isn't knocked out of the attack's range before it's over. It does about 40 damage, and it recharges in about 3 seconds. I might buff the recharge to 4 seconds, but yeah. And if you press the secondary skill button again, you will switch back to Boglet. By the way, Grotkin has 150 health, while Boglet has 50. The way that works is transitioning between Boglet and Grotkin will multiply the health by 3 and divide it by 3 respectively. So if, let's say, Boglet's on 30 health, he will be at 90 health when you switch to Grotkin. And when you switch back from Grotkin, he will go back to 30, effectively. So, functionally, the way it works is they share an HP bar, but Boglet has a significantly lower defense than Grotkin does. Boglet, the gimmick here is, by the way, they have the same sized hitbox, effectively, because of Boglet's backpack. So yeah, effectively what the end goal here is to have a character that's really, really good at navigating levels, that being Boglet, and a character that's really, really good at combat situations, that being Grotkin, that take up the same character slot. The caveat here is that they obviously don't have aerial skills between them, and neither form has 2 skills. It's just the 1 skill and the basic. Grotkin, unlike Boglet, Grotkin's aerial basic actually has a unique animation. But yeah, and by the way, it takes 6 seconds before the charge for the switch mechanic refills. So yeah, Boglet will not be playable until the final public build of the game releases. Not final as in the last one I do, but final as in all 10 story mode stages are complete and every other base game feature is implemented. And also, one thing, I have to mention this because I think some people would ask this. No, you do not have a damage hitbox while you're transforming. It's not like a super where you'll damage the enemy if you activate it. You are leaving yourself vulnerable when you change. It just doesn't last too long, so it's not too big of an issue. They don't quite have the stun lock capability someone like Foestripe has, but they're still, Grotkin is still really, really good. So, I do not see myself maining the Boglet in the future. I do not see myself maining them in the future, but I see someone doing it. I don't know. It's a very, very weird character, which is the point. I couldn't really make a good finale character without either making something crazy gimmicky, which is what I did here, or making a character that is just broken when compared to everyone else, which is not something I wanted to do. Boglet will still probably be unbalanced in I don't know what way. Maybe he'll be useless, maybe he'll be busted. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But yeah, I wanted a weird character to round off the roster, and the DLC characters will be relatively traditional, at least more traditional to Boglet. This is not the standard the DLC characters will have. The standard the DLC characters will have will be like Bizok, I guess. I don't know.